My parents tried to make me fund my sister's life. Now they're homeless and cut out of the will. They treated me like a backup plan, begged me to buy my sister a house, and tried to guilt-trip me into funding her kids' futures. But I said no, then watched the entire family finally see the truth. Now, they lost their home, their inheritance, and the respect they thought they owned. They raised me to sacrifice for family, so I sacrificed them instead. Growing up, I always had this gut feeling that I wasn't the favorite. It's not something anyone ever said out loud, but you don't need words when actions say it for you. My parents, Susan and Robert, made it pretty clear early on that their hearts were reserved for my younger sister, Emma. Emma could do no wrong. She was the golden child, the one they bragged about to neighbors, posted about on Facebook, and poured all their time and energy into. Meanwhile, I was just there. I kept my head down, tried not to rock the boat, and learned how to rely on myself, because it was obvious no one else was going to. It wasn't like I was a troublemaker or anything. I actually worked my ass off. I took my schoolwork seriously, picked up after myself, followed the rules, you name it. But no matter what I did, it was never quite enough. A B+ was met with a raised eyebrow and a why not an A, while Emma got a standing ovation for simply showing up to class. She had every door opened for her. My folks made sure she had music lessons, tutors, new clothes for every season, and a brand new phone the second a newer model dropped. And me? I got hand-me-downs and a lot of we'll see-s that always turned into no-s. I learned early on that if I wanted anything, a car, a laptop, college, I'd have to figure it out on my own. And so I did. I started working part-time jobs in high school, grocery store, local pizza place, a bit of landscaping during summers. I saved every penny. When it came time for college, I applied for every scholarship I could find and took on a mountain of student loans. I balanced work and classes like a full-time juggler, barely sleeping, living on black coffee and drive-through breakfasts. But I made it through. I graduated with a degree I fought tooth and nail to earn and landed a solid job within a few months, steady paycheck, benefits, the works. Not glamorous, but it was mine. I built that life brick by brick and I was proud of it. But did my parents ever say they were proud? Not once. They never came to my graduation. Claimed they couldn't get the time off, even though I later found out they'd flown out the week before to visit Emma during her latest relationship crisis. When I told them about the job offer, all I got was a generic "that's good. Hope it works out." Meanwhile, they were practically throwing a parade every time Emma picked up a new hobby or posted a picture with her kids. Now, to be clear, I didn't resent Emma at first. Not really. I mean, it's not her fault our parents babied her. But over the years, I started seeing a pattern. Emma would crash and burn, and everyone would run to scoop up the pieces. She married at 19, divorced by 21 after her husband cheated. Then came husband number 2, a guy with a gambling problem who lost their house. By her late 20s, she was married for the 3rd time, had 6 kids under 12, and still hadn't found her footing. And still, my parents were there, helping with rent, groceries, child care, school supplies, even giving her loans they never expected back. They always had an excuse ready. She's got a lot on her plate. She just needs time. You know it's different for girls. Yeah, different. Like how she gets handed everything while I'm out here dodging debt collectors and figuring out taxes solo. But even with all that, I never asked for anything. Not one favor. I kept grinding, climbing the ladder, and minding my own business. I figured maybe one day they'd see it, how I kept going, how I never gave up. Maybe they'd finally say, "Hey, we're proud of you." But that day never came. Instead, what came next blindsided me, and looking back now, it all makes sense. The sudden praise. The surprise dinner invites. The texts asking how I was doing. For the first time in years, my parents seemed to be reaching out, acting like they cared. I just didn't realize they weren't finally seeing me. They were preparing to use me. It started off subtle, just little things here and there that felt different. My mom began texting more often, asking how work was going or if I'd eaten. My dad, who usually had the emotional range of a microwave, even called me one weekend just to check in. I won't lie, I was caught off guard. For a second, I let myself believe maybe something had shifted. Maybe they finally saw me, not just as the kid who never needed help, but as their son, a real part of the family. It felt strange, but a little good too. I'd waited years for that kind of connection, and against my better judgment, I let my guard down. Then came the dinner invite. "We're having a little get-together next weekend," my mom said over the phone. "Just family. Would love to see you." I hesitated but agreed. After all, maybe this was it, the breakthrough moment I'd always hoped for. I showed up that Saturday wearing a button-up and bringing a bottle of wine. Emma was already there with her brood of 6, her husband barely making eye contact with anyone as he fiddled with his phone in the corner. The kids were loud but sweet. Chaos, but familiar chaos. Dinner started out fine. We talked about work, swapped small talk, laughed at some harmless memories. For the first hour it almost felt like we were a normal family, like the ones you see in commercials. I started to believe it was real. Then the conversation turned. My mom sighed heavily, clasping her hands on the table like she was about to give a eulogy. "It's just been so hard lately," she said. "Emma's doing the best she can, but raising 6 kids on one income, it's nearly impossible." My dad chimed in. "We've done everything we can to help her, but we're at our limit." I nodded, unsure where this was going but already feeling that familiar twist in my stomach. Emma stayed quiet, staring at her plate. Her husband was still scrolling through his phone like this had nothing to do with him. Then came the kicker. "You've been doing so well, honey," my mom said, turning to me with that syrupy tone that always made my skin crawl. "You have a good job, no family to support, no major expenses. We think it's time you gave back for the family." I blinked. "What exactly do you mean?" They looked at each other, then back at me like they'd rehearsed it. "We have a plan," my dad said. "Emma needs a bigger place, the rental's too small. A 5-bedroom would be perfect for the kids. You could help her buy it. And we were thinking you could set up some college funds, just something small for each of the kids, so they have a future." My mouth went dry. I stared at them, waiting for the punchline. It didn't come. And my mom continued, "It would really help if you could give her maybe $5,000 a month. Just until she gets her blog business off the ground. She's really passionate about it." I choked on a laugh that never fully formed. They weren't asking for help. They were handing me a bill, a lifelong invoice for my sister's choices, wrapped in guilt and labeled family duty. "Wait," I said, trying to process. "You want me to buy her a house? Fund 6 college accounts? And pay her monthly?" "Yes," my dad said plainly. "You're the only one in a position to do this." It hit me like a gut punch, all the recent kindness, the phone calls, the compliments. It wasn't pride. It wasn't love. It was a setup. They saw me as a walking checkbook. Emma's safety net. Her personal bank. I sat back, stunned into silence. Finally I spoke. "Look, I'm not heartless. If she needs help with a utility bill or an emergency, fine. But I'm not taking on her entire life. That's not fair." That's when the temperature in the room changed. My mom's eyes welled up instantly. "So you're just going to turn your back on your family when we need you the most?" My dad shook his head in disappointment. "Selfish. I always knew it." Emma finally looked up, her expression blank. Like she wasn't surprised, like she'd already counted on me saying no. The night ended with my parents storming out, accusing me of being ungrateful, of revealing my true colors. I sat there staring at the remains of dinner, wondering how it had come to this. And then just a few hours later, the text started. First from Emma, then from her kids. Little messages like, "Uncle, why don't you love us anymore?" and "Mommy says you don't care about family." I couldn't take it. I blocked every number. That night, I lay in bed wondering if I was wrong, if I really had failed them somehow. But deep down, I knew the truth. They never wanted a son. They wanted a sponsor. After that dinner, I figured the worst was over. They were angry, sure, but maybe they'd cool off. I was wrong. Within hours, Emma flooded my phone with messages, and I mean nonstop. Voice notes, texts, photos of her kids looking sad, lines like, "You're ruining their future," and "What kind of uncle does this?" Even her kids messaged me, obviously coached, saying things like, "Uncle doesn't love us anymore," and "Why don't you want us to have a house?" It was emotional warfare and I was the target. I blocked every number just to breathe. For a moment I thought I was overreacting, but then something unexpected happened. My grandmother called me out of the blue. She's my dad's mom and not the type to get involved unless it's serious. Apparently, my parents had been telling the extended family that their successful son was going to take care of Emma and all her kids, painting a picture of me swooping in to save the day with my overflowing bank account. They'd built this fantasy without even asking me first. So when I said no, they weren't just disappointed, they were humiliated. My grandma was furious. She had no idea any of this was happening. She thought Emma was getting help from her husbands and that my parents were just being generous here and there, not bleeding themselves dry or expecting me to step in like some kind of family-funded government program. She told me she and Grandpa were done with the lies. They weren't just disappointed, they were disgusted. Then she said something that shook me. They were considering cutting my parents out of their will entirely. She said they'd rather leave everything to people who worked hard and didn't manipulate others to get by. It was the first time I felt like someone in my family truly saw what I'd been going through. Word spread quickly. Relatives started reaching out, cousins, aunts, people I barely talked to, telling me they had no idea things had been so one-sided for so long. Some apologized for not noticing. My mom's sister, Aunt Linda, even called me crying, saying she was sorry for how differently I'd been treated growing up. She said she always thought I was just more independent, more put together. But now she realized I'd been forced to be that way because no one had my back. The dynamic in the family started to shift. People were taking sides and not many were standing with my parents anymore. And my parents? They were losing it. My phone started buzzing again, this time with voicemails full of sobbing and anger. My mom left one saying I was ruining Emma's children's lives. My dad called me selfish, said I'd regret this when the family fell apart. Then they'd switch gears, saying we were family and that family helps each other. It was emotional whiplash and I was exhausted. I started to question myself again. Had I gone too far? Was I being too cold? But every time I thought about giving in, I pictured years of being drained dry, emotionally and financially. Also, Emma could keep living like her choices didn't have consequences. I was raised on the idea that family comes first, that you sacrifice for the people you love, but what do you do when the people you love treat you like a bank account with no feelings? I didn't have the answer yet, but I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going back to the way things were. Not anymore. A few days after that stormy dinner and the phone call fallout, I got another unexpected call, this time from Grandpa. He and Grandma had been quiet since our last conversation, but now he sounded serious. They were organizing a family meeting. Not just a casual get-together, but a full-on conference call with aunts, uncles, cousins, anyone close enough to be affected. And they wanted me there. I had no clue what they were planning, but something in Grandpa's voice told me this wasn't just about clearing the air. The day of the call, I logged in and saw way more family than I expected. My stomach was in knots. Then Grandma took the lead. No greetings, no pleasantries. She went straight in. We need to talk about how money has been handled in this family. And just like that, the floodgates opened. She and Grandpa had given my parents over $200,000 over the years, money meant for both Emma and me, equally, to help with school, living expenses, and getting a head start in life. They had assumed it was split evenly. It wasn't. Not even close. I sat there stunned. I had clawed my way through college with scholarships, loans, and late-night jobs while my parents had been sitting on a pile of cash that was supposed to help me too. Meanwhile, Emma had been floating from marriage to marriage, getting bailed out every time she stumbled. All that money had gone to her, to rent, wedding bills, divorce lawyers, therapy, who knows what else. My grandparents were livid. They made it crystal clear that they felt betrayed. They had trusted my parents to do the right thing, and now that they saw how deep the favoritism ran, they were done. Then came the legal part. They had already changed their will. My parents were out. They'd contacted a lawyer to formalize everything. But that wasn't all. They were setting up individual trust funds for each of their great-grandkids, including Emma's 6, plus my cousin's kids. The twist? Those funds would be controlled by an independent trustee, not any family member, and could only be used for specific purposes like education or medical needs. No one, not even Emma or my parents, would have access to the cash. It was their way of making sure the next generation had a real shot without the drama or manipulation. My parents didn't say a word the entire meeting. Not one excuse. Not one defense. Just stone-cold silence. I think they finally realized they'd pushed too far. That people saw them now for who they really were. The aftermath was messy. People started putting the pieces together. Aunts remembered loans they gave my parents that were supposedly for me. Cousins recalled being told I didn't want a big graduation party when in reality my parents just never wanted to attend. It was like watching years of lies unravel in real time. But in the middle of all that chaos, I felt something I hadn't in years: clarity. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. I had been used and ignored, and now finally people were starting to see the truth. After the family meeting, it was like someone had ripped the lid off a box that had been sealed for decades. Relatives started reaching out left and right, not just to support me, but to share stories of their own. Things they brushed off at the time but now saw in a whole new light. One aunt said she loaned my parents money after Emma's second divorce, thinking it was for an emergency surgery or something serious. Another cousin recalled being told that my parents needed help paying for my college textbooks, even though I had never seen a single dollar from anyone. The more I heard, the more it became obvious. My parents had built a long, intricate web of manipulation, playing the family in need card whenever they wanted to fund Emma's lifestyle. They never said the money was for her directly. They just told people it was for the kids or for the family, knowing most folks wouldn't question it. And as these stories surfaced, my phone kept buzzing with screenshots, forwarded messages, and long overdue apologies. One of my cousins even showed me old texts from my parents, right after I graduated, asking them not to come to my ceremony because I wanted something low-key. I had spent weeks hoping anyone would show up. I thought nobody cared. But now I realize my own parents actively tried to keep it small to keep the attention on Emma. That one stung more than I expected. Through all of this, Emma kept messaging me. Her tone shifted every time. One message would be nostalgic, full of "remember when we were close?" energy, the next would be guilt-laced "please," then back to soft-hearted, "I never realized how bad it was for you." But every message, no matter the mood, had one thing in common: a request for help. Money for groceries, help with school supplies, a down payment for a used car, assistance with her mom blog idea. No matter how she framed it, soft or desperate, it was always a reach into my pocket. And each time I stared at the screen, torn between the brother in me and the man who had finally learned to draw a line. It was harder than I thought. I wasn't heartless. Her kids didn't ask for any of this. They were innocent. I felt for them. But at the same time, I couldn't keep pretending that I was the solution to problems I didn't create. Emma had let this system work for her for so long, maybe she didn't even realize it anymore. Maybe she truly believed I owed her something. That thought haunted me. Meanwhile, my parents weren't staying quiet. After the email they blasted to the whole family blew up in their faces, they sent a second one trying to walk it back, saying they'd written it in a moment of anger, and that it was never meant to hurt anyone. But come on, the first email had bullet points, spreadsheets, dollar amounts. That wasn't a knee-jerk reaction. That was premeditated. And no one was buying the backpedaling. Even their longtime friends were beginning to pull away. Some of them admitted they'd loaned my parents money thinking it was for emergencies. Now they were wondering if they'd been funding Emma too. I kept wondering how long this had been going on. How much of my life had been shaped by a story I didn't even know was being written behind my back. And every time I let myself feel that weight, a part of me cracked open a little more. I was tired, not just from the drama, but from finally seeing it all for what it was. The truth felt like both a relief and a punch to the gut. It explained so much. It validated every moment I'd spent questioning my place in the family. But it also hurt in a way I wasn't fully ready for. The people who should have protected me, cheered for me, believed in me. They saw me as an accessory to someone else's life. I wasn't their son. I was their fallback plan. And now, standing up for myself made me the enemy. I kept thinking maybe if I just said yes, maybe things would be easier. But I also knew deep down that if I gave in now, I'd never stop giving. It would never be enough. And I was done being invisible. Things escalated faster than I expected. My grandparents, who'd always been the peacekeepers, decided it was time to end the chaos once and for all. They scheduled a final family meeting, this time with their lawyer present. That alone told me it wasn't going to be a chat about feelings. It was about action. The call felt different. Tense. Final. Everyone showed up, or at least everyone who still cared enough to face what was coming. The lawyer took over quickly and laid it all out. My grandparents weren't just cutting my parents out of the will. They were reorganizing everything immediately, putting their assets into secure trusts and removing any room for manipulation. No more gray areas. No more "we'll handle it later." And then came the big blow. The family-owned vacation home, the one my parents had been living in rent-free for over a decade, was being sold. It had started as a temporary place to stay between moves, but they'd turned it into their permanent residence, assuming it would be handed down to them one day. That dream died in real time. The lawyer slid over the notice. They had 60 days to vacate the property. No extensions. No appeals. It was done. For the first time, I saw real panic on their faces. Not anger. Not defiance. Just shock. All those years of control, of calling the shots, and now they were being forced to downsize into a small apartment and live without a safety net. My grandparents weren't doing this out of spite. They were doing it because they'd finally had enough. They were tired of watching one side of the family struggle while the other coasted on handouts and entitlement. They also weren't stopping there. They announced the formation of educational grants, annual ones for any family member pursuing school or professional training administered through a neutral third party. No one in the family would be touching the money directly. That meant Emma's kids were covered, so were my cousin's children, but no one could dip into those funds and twist them into something they weren't meant for. It was a massive change. My parents didn't argue. Maybe they knew it was useless. Maybe they were too stunned to respond. Either way, they stayed quiet, and that silence said more than words ever could. The fallout didn't end there. For the first time, Emma seemed to get it. With my parents scrambling, their constant support vanished and she couldn't lean on them anymore. Her husband still worked part-time as a delivery driver, but now he started picking up more shifts. And Emma? She did something I never expected. She enrolled in a vocational course for medical billing and coding. She wasn't asking for money. She wasn't begging for help. She was trying to figure it out. Then out of nowhere, she emailed me asking for help with her resume. No guilt trips. No manipulation. Just a genuine request to look over her formatting and wording. And I did it. Not because I felt obligated, but because for once it didn't feel like a trick. It felt like a step in the right direction. But the most surprising shift came from her kids. Through her ex, the father of her two oldest, they got in touch with me. Apparently, my grandparents had arranged therapy sessions for them. After everything blew up, the kids had been caught in the middle of years of favoritism, mixed messages, and emotional confusion. The therapy was helping them sort it out. The older one sent me a message apologizing for the things they said when this all started, those "you don't love us" texts that had haunted me. They told me they didn't know how much pressure their mom had put on me and that they felt bad for being used as emotional pawns. That broke me a little. I told them it was okay. They were kids, just doing what they were told. They didn't deserve to carry any of this. I hoped the therapy would help them understand that they weren't responsible for fixing the mess the adults had made. As for my parents, they still hadn't fully accepted the new reality. They started sending me old photos from when I was little, ones with captions like, "Remember when we were a happy family?" or "Don't forget who raised you." Some were passive-aggressive. Others just sad. A few made it sound like they were the victims, abandoned by everyone they ever helped. I couldn't tell if it was a genuine attempt to reconnect or just another guilt trip in disguise. Maybe it didn't matter anymore. Most of the family had drawn their own conclusions by now. People saw the truth. The silence between us had turned into something deeper, a boundary, finally respected, even if it was cold. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I had to fix it.